I've obviously, as you can tell by my background, I am not at my own house, and I should have considered that when I planned this. Let me see if this is coming through. Let's see. Unfortunately, I have to check using another phone because I'm using my phone because my computer wasn't working. Yep, there it is. It says I'm live. Okay, perfect. Okay. I said this last week in my live stream that you have to kind of have an amount of flexibility. And I think with technology, that's like a forced thing. You have to be flexible, technologically speaking. Um, so, point taken, do live streams only at my own house where I know all of the tech ins and outs. And side note, always have your tripod with you. Um, but so this is about a problem that I often see. It's not even a problem. It's almost like a personality type of thing. Of um, I am I love the big picture. I love talking strategy. I love looking at it from this overarching like narrative and looking at what goals to set and like what like campaigns and like the bigger picture. But I've also had clients who they'll ask for that, but they don't end up implementing. Or there will be an element of, I've even had a colleague say, hey, I've overdone it on strategy. I do strategy so much. I just need help with actually putting it into practice. So there's like this wide, um, you know, slider, almost like the slider bar, and spectrum of uh, having that strategy, but also like the daily actions. And there's so many people who they're really far on that daily actions because it's like one of those things of like you have to slow down to create that plan. And things like the algorithm, things like like client work, all of these other things stack up. So it feels very much like the only choice in that case is to be reactive about what to post, about like what idea came into my head. Let me go ahead and post it. And I think there honestly is something to be said about that kind of in the moment content. I used to be kind of heavily against posting in that reactive place. And I think it's almost like a mindset thing of having some things that serve that bigger picture, that serve like the offer that you're trying to promote either this month or next month. And then also giving yourself that flexibility and that like adaptability to react to things that are ongoing, like in the industry that you work in like conversations that are being had, trends that are going on, or even like new, like if the news is something that you feel like you need to address in your content. um, like let's say you're an author and stuff like public media, being voted against. I think that happened within the last couple of days. If you're a podcaster, you're in in that kind of media space, like that is something that maybe you feel like for what it makes sense to talk about that kind of thing. um so I think that there's a little bit of both that needs to happen, and we're kind of at what, midway through July. So you probably have, if you're the type of person to do quarterly planning, you probably have already done that now. And which I have done, and I did some reels on Instagram about that. I might actually repost them at some point on here on YouTube as well. But this is always the point, like the 2 to 3 weeks in, where I'm like, okay, so I did the quarterly planning. Now, how am I going to like actually put that into practice and make that progress on like a weekly or a daily like momentum and like get that rhythm. So it's like kind of like you need both of those things. You need that big picture strategy, because if we're just doing things just off the cuff all of the time, it doesn't really like serve those greater needs. A lot of folks in the marketing space, and I've said it before at some of my workshops when I did stuff for the library, but I know that Jamar Diggs has said this as well. Like when you are a business owner or a creative or an author, if you know, in all of those different types of fields, like a service provider, you do not get paid by the view. Like on YouTube, you know, I'm sure everyone is aware by now. Like if you get a set amount of subscribers, you have a set amount of watch hours. YouTube and Google will share their ad revenue with you. So some people do get paid by the minute watched. Some people do get paid by, by that. But for most business owners, we only get paid when we get customers. So the content that's going to get seen and liked and shared is not always going to be the stuff that's actually going to get you clients, get you customers. And I think that is been the biggest push for me in my business, and when I do speaking engagements, of helping us rethink social media, because social media algorithms, the billionaires all get paid by how long we just stay on those platforms. The longer we watch, the longer we scroll, the more they get paid. But that's not necessarily the case for us, and so I think we have to kind of divorce of what the algorithm may want and what helps Meta and what helps Google and what helps all of these companies, and what will actually help ourselves. So that's where I think the big picture comes into it, of thinking, what offers do I have? Like, what are the questions that I get often from clients? Like, we talked about this a little bit in the customer conversion cycle YouTube video that I did, and I think I'll do more about this in the future, of like, what's those like band-aid level, like what is like the very tip of that iceberg that people are scratching? What are the things that people think is the problem when really it's just a symptom, which happens a lot, especially in if you are a transformational service provider or you're doing really deep, complex work with folks. A lot of folks are not coming to you when and being like, this big, deep, complex problem is my problem. They're usually coming at it from the way of like, oh no, this thing that's like just a tiny piece of it is the problem. And like having that big picture that leads from that point to understanding the framework, understanding the problem better, helping them get to the point where they are like ready to take action. And then also on the like, to make things easier for you, what are clients that you work well with, or who are those folks that like, what are those qualities? How do you want to signal to those people, hey, I am the person for you? So it's like goes both ways, helping the person understand their problem deeper, but also helping you filter out the people who are not a good fit. It's literally a conversation I had with a fellow marketing person, a branding designer, about how sometimes it's not good for those wrong fit people either. Those wrong fit people deserve somebody who's going to gel with them or has values that are similar to theirs, or whatever that those qualities are. So it goes both ways, of like helping people search you out, but also you helping filter out the people that are not going to maybe get results or be just a good fit from a value standpoint. So that's kind of that big picture piece, is thinking through what the client needs, thinking through what our offer, how do we talk about our offer, how do we position our own expertise, because we have like our story. I talk about this all the time. Your story and your expertise and your background and your lived experiences are going to resonate with folks, but we also have to show that I'm trying to think of the right word, of we have to find the right aspects of that, or talk through how like that is relevant to them, because not everything, it's like almost like this behemoth, right? Not everything is going to be relevant in the moment, in the time, or like be succinct about it. So having that language that you can go back to, the positioning statements, the elevator pitch, the like your bio, like on social, all of those aspects. So having that first and foremost, that's why I work with that first, because having that language is overarching, and then you can kind of drill down into the messaging for specific offers, for your done for you versus your maybe more of your courses or membership type of services, um, and all of that. And having that idea. So that big, and then the quarterly again, was you're going through quarterly planning, you're going to have timed specific either campaigns or goals that you're trying to reach. Maybe you're in a phase where you want to grow your audience. Maybe you're in a phase where you want to streamline and make some of your processes repeatable. So it's like taking some of your capacity. We talked about that a little bit last week about how that is super important if you're chronically ill or you're somebody who needs to take time away, like having things that you can either hand off to somebody else or just be able to take a lot of the brain power out of creating something brand new every time. It's kind of why when I'm working with clients, like I recommend like what I call that minimum viable marketing campaign of like, here's a self-contained marketing that you can both judge that effectiveness and have repeatable assets. Like if it's a minimal marketing campaign, you're still probably going to need an email sequence for that. You probably will need some sort of either like workshop or conversion event or something that's like a bite-sized piece of something that is like a conversion event. So taking that aspect to it and like finding ways to like use that as the basis for future campaigns. And like, again, of course, iterating and refining on it, but it's a lot easier in the grand scheme of things to refine something than it is to start it all brand new all over again. So that kind of is the bridge point to the big picture strategy versus the daily actions. Because once you can kind of break down that strategy into a self-contained campaign, then it will become a little bit easier to be like, okay, so in 4 week span, like let's say so developers use sprint cycles and they're often in a 30-day sprint. I'm using that as an example because I do think 30 days is kind of perfect for somebody who's neurodivergent like myself, because it's a deadline that is like you can get a pretty good amount of stuff done, but it's close enough that I'm not going to necessarily procrastinate all of that. So using 4 weeks as an example of like, okay, so week 1, I'm going to like film all the reels to build awareness, and then maybe week 2, I'm creating the slides and content for the long form content, either the anchor content that is going to be more sharing that perspective, or maybe a workshop or something like that. And then week 3, I'm going to create the emails that will either be lead into the conversion and the follow-up. And then the final month, I will write out all the social media to promote that event, or to, or at least the evergreen content that will lead into that, like offer, and the workshop is a piece of that. So kind of like just every week having some sort of project that leads into the bigger campaign. It like I said, it really helps. When I was in college for marketing, I had 8-week terms instead of like the typical 16 weeks. And because of that, so it was great because I only had 2 classes at a time. So could really focus in on the material, which helped. But because it was 8 weeks long, a paper was due every weekend. It was literally due every weekend at like Sunday at like midnight or whatever. And because it was on this weekly, I got into this weekly rhythm of just writing a paper like every, I would start like Thursday, I'd finish it up on Saturday, maybe, or have some time on the weekend to work on that. But because it was compressed, that sounds bad at first, but like you just got into the habit of doing it. And then it became like, okay, I'm not, when we had bigger, longer projects, 8 weeks was still close enough that I'm like, no, I have to have an outline done by like week 4 to show to my professor or whatever. So like I got into that kind of rhythm. And I've noticed in the past that 12 weeks, like I made some progress last quarter, but I wasn't making consistent progress every single week. It was bursts of activity, and this is kind of normal again, especially for somebody who's chronically ill. Like there's bursts of activity, and then I'll even tell you, like this week, I didn't do as much as I normally would for lots of reasons, but I think it's because that 12 weeks is too long sometimes, for me, definitely. So compressing it down to either 8 weeks or 4 weeks, I think that can help take that big picture strategy and break it down. And some projects are going to stretch out longer. Like, let's say you have live events, you need to secure a venue, you need to do things like that. That is going to be a bit longer, but you can still do like campaigns. Like if you're getting like, okay, this 4 weeks, I'm going to work just on like getting sponsors, this next 4 weeks, I'm going to just work on, like releasing like the programming or the speakers, like, and just breaking it up like 4 week cycles at a time. And there's a reason, I think, why the developers tend to do that. And like I said, that like, it's not to say that you just build it and move on. I think that that's what we often do. We're like, okay, I built like this private podcast, or I built this lead magnet, or I built this email sequence, I built this funnel. Okay, now like I'm just gonna move on to the next thing. And so I think that that's kind of where that mixture goes of having that big picture, but also having the in the fly moments, or just being able to check in with like, hey, how did that go afterwards? Was is this a tactic I want to continue to do? For example, I'm doing live streams. This is the second one in a row so far. Thank goodness the tech didn't cause a bunch of issues. Well, it did, but I mean, like, I figured it out eventually, so I'm proud of myself for actually like doing the thing, But I feel like in my first business, like 8 years ago, I did like weekly live streams on Facebook specifically. It was back when Facebook was a little more oh shoot, was a little more okay. Like practical, or actually it wasn't quite as saturated as it is now. But I did that for 12 weeks. And while I enjoyed doing it, I didn't really get a lot of traction from that. There was a couple of times where I did get traction with like one of them, because I shared it in a couple of groups. So that was, the kind of like, oh, I need to share it with more places. But if, but within reason, of course, you don't want to violate rules of communities if they don't have promotion in them. Which I will tell you, in my Story Spark Lounge in the Discord server, I've talked about it a few times, we do have places where we do allow promotion, because I feel like it's different in a place like Discord where there's different channels, people don't have to look at it, it's on Facebook groups, there's no separation, so you are allowed to do that in mine if you want. Just sticking it to the places, like share your work or whatnot. But yeah, so I did that for 12 weeks. I'm like, well, I'm not really getting anything from this, as far as like and maybe I should have just done it for a whole year, maybe that was the problem. Maybe I gave up too soon, but I feel like 3 months is the bare minimum, maybe 6 months, and just checking in energetically. Is this something that I can continue? Because sometimes, again, when you have chronic illness, you're like, maybe I'm getting results from it, but maybe it's at too high of a cost energetically. That can also happen. Let me go ahead and have a drink real quick. Speaking of health, but yeah, so this is going to be a shorter one just because of the fact that I got on a little bit late. But I think that knowing like what actions to take, and just kind of having this understanding of, because energy will fluctuate. Like I said, I'm like, hey, I didn't do as much this week as I did last week. I did do a lot last week. And I think as long as if it averages out, is kind of my hope of like let's say you want to be on podcasts and you want to pitch maybe 2 podcasts a week, let's say. There are going to be weeks you're not going to do that. So, for the weeks where you do have that a little bit more energy and you're able to get more stuff done, like do 3 or 4, just know, with the understanding of like knowing there might be a week where you only do 1, or you do 0, and so I think that daily action can also be a way to kind of just check yourself of like, in the last month, what was the average? What can I do to kind of maybe um, make up ground for it, or just kind of know, hey, in the summertime, I have too much going on. So maybe, like for example, I have a yearly goal of so many connection conversations, um, like through the whole year. And I will say I blew that out of the water last quarter. I was having a lot of conversations, building a lot of relationships. I was investing a lot of time in my community, and that was something that was important to me. Um, but I also, like, I did not set that kind of goal for myself again. Just knowing, hey, it's summertime. July and August are probably going to be not as many people. So I did that in April and May, just kind of knowing that I was going to slow down. Um, and knowing that it will all even out in the end, like in the end. Um, so that's just kind of a way I like to think of the giving yourself kind of grace in those goals when you're making those goals of just having that, like, hey, I just talked to somebody at a networking event today, like everything comes in seasons, like that is how life works. And sometimes we will set goals either because we're in denial about the season we're in. That's definitely been true for me. Of like, this is the time I'm visible, and I'm like, no, that was not the time I'm visible. Uh, so sometimes that kind of forces us to change. And like I said, I didn't make a goal of investing in community specifically, but that's a theme that I'm like, okay, that really did work for me last quarter. I need to lean more into that. So like having that time to reflect. Um, both at the end of the quarter and checking in either weekly with yourself on Fridays. This is a good day to do it, or like monthly at least. Monthly gives you enough data to like look back, I think. Um, so that's kind of why I built up a marketing planner that has a weekly review and a monthly review. Looking at the weekly reviews and like kind of seeing, and then like deciding on in the month of like, okay, what should I continue doing, or what do I need to maybe do more of, what isn't really working, um, from a productivity standpoint, or just like holding yourself accountable. I think that's kind of the struggle, right? Is making the plans, and then the implementing piece is like, okay, you unless you're like being proactive every week and planning out when you're going to do those things, and either putting them on your calendar. I don't necessarily put it on my calendar per se. I tried to show that last week, but I have a weekly planning like board on my project management system, and it's like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and I just drag things around, so to not hold myself to a specific time frame, because things often take longer than you expect them to. So if you like go by the minute, at least for me, that will throw off my day. So if I just put 2 or 3 things on the day, then I'll know that I didn't give myself too many things usually. Um, so like having that of being intentional week in and week out about like the things that have to get done. Like there's always things that have to get done, like the client work, the deliverables, um, the appointments, the calls that you have to take. All of those things are already going to be there. Like, but you are going to often have to be intentional about fitting in the bigger strategic actions. So just every Monday of like, what's just a couple of things that fit that big strategic goal that that will lead me, that will keep building our way to it. So I definitely help folks with that, kind of build out that roadmap of like, hey, here's what to work on first, here's what to work on next. What is that mini campaign that we can really test drive the messaging and the content, and seeing what topics will really resonate with clients, using that voice of customer research. So that's something that I do with folks through a narrative growth audit. If that's something that you just want somebody to kind of look under the hood of your business and kind of help you at least just get started and get going, and just knowing what the opportunities are there and what stories there are to be told in your business, feel free to comment. If this is on LinkedIn, you can DM me. And I'd love to hear, what helps you connect that big strategy to the things that you're doing week in and week out.